Hello and welcome to Exotic Sorbets. My name is Michael Niksic, and yes, I am a chef. Been a chef in the Chicago area my entire life. And you probably noticed from my hat it says to stop TPH syndrome. This is my point in time to address a very serious social problem that's facing our community as we speak. TPH syndrome. Tall paper hat syndrome. Why anyone would still wear a paper hat in this day and age is beyond me. Some chefs will say that I'm being disrespectful because I wear a baseball cap and they wear a paper hat. Now, I don't know any other profession that wears a paper hat. Firefighters do not wear paper hats. Soldiers do not wear paper hats. Deep sea divers do not wear paper hats. I don't understand where it goes. But here's the problem. I'm a Southsider, and it's up to me to give out fashion advice because somebody is so crazy that their mother or their daughters or their wives or their in-laws or their friends or their neighbors actually let them out of the house wearing one of these things? Are you kidding me? Stop it! It's insane. Now they'll sit there and they'll say, "Oh well, look, you wear a baseball hat. That's extremely insulting to the char trade." Well, here's the problem with that. The most American hat we have is a baseball hat, born out of the blood and ashes of the American Civil War, something that's more poignant than ever these days. And during that point in time, Union troops in particular, they wore a hat called the kepi, which was modeled after a French military hat called the kepi. And it had a hard bill on it. Now, before the Civil War started, baseball was already the American pastime, posting scores in all the newspapers. Fans were following the game across the country. But during the Civil War, there was a lot of downtime in encampments, Union and Confederate. So they spent their time playing baseball when they weren't drilling. At the end of the Civil War, the baseball leagues adapted the hard bill hat, which makes this the most American hat we have. And unfortunately, there's a lot of American chefs that don't quite see it that way. They would much rather go through life wearing a roll of paper towels on their head. I don't understand it myself. But we got to put an end to it because it's really, really sad when you go out into a dining room and it's filled with people in gowns, tuxedos, and there's one guy walking around with a paper hat. Now, I don't know about you guys, but when I was in grade school, if anyone wore a tall paper hat, that was not good. And if your parents found out you were at school wearing one of those tall paper hats, guaranteed you took a whooping. So, since I can't dish out any whoopings, please ask the next person you see wearing one of those paper hats why they're not wearing cloth. Professionals should be wearing cloth, not paper. I'm done with my rant. So let's move on. We're going to be talking about exotic sorbets, and we're going to be getting into exotic sorbets. We're going to be making a hibiscus and peach sorbet. We're going to be doing mango and lime, and we're going to be doing a cherry honey meade sorbet, straight out of my cookbook, Hearty and Healthy Polish Cooking. And we're going to be doing all three and their applications. Remember, like all of our previous videos and future videos, don't worry about what we're putting in and how much we're putting in. Follow the methods. At the end of the video, all the recipes will be supplied. All the questions will be answered. Remember, methods rule. Recipes are secondary to methods, always. Without methods, recipes do not exist. All right, on that note, let's get started. Okay, we're going to start with our next sorbet, and this is out of the Hearty and Healthy Polish Cooking Cookbook that I wrote a few years ago. And this one is a Cherry Honey Meade Sorbet. We're going to be using dark cherries, cherry juice. We're going to be using some honey mead that I just heated up. We're going to add some gelatin to it and basically fold it into the puree of cherries. And we're going to be all set and ready to rock and roll. Now, the cool thing about using gelatin is it keeps the sorbet that we're using, the way we're making it, from getting too hard once it freezes. That's the main reason for using the gelatin. Also, too, the acidity of the fruit that we're using, the sugar that we're using, again, all combined help keep the sorbet from getting too hard. Remember, the difference between these sorbets and ones made in the machine is air. The machines, while they're freezing the sorbets or the ice creams, are whipping air into them. Since we are not using a machine, and this recipe is basically being geared for people that don't have ice cream machines but want to make their own ice cream or their own sorbets, this is pretty much how you're going to do it with the highest success rate. And in this particular instance, there's going to be a very heavy cherry concentrate as far as the flavor goes, not only between the pureed cherries, but also to the juice itself. You always want to use the best ingredients when you're doing something like this because it will show in the end. If you buy a cheap brand of cherry juice, maybe something that's 50% apple juice along those lines, you're not going to have very good results. So you got to ante up and buy yourself a good quality cherry juice, and you also have to get good quality cherries as well too. So we're about to start the usual routine. The blender comes on and the sound goes off. Okay, we're going to melt the gelatin into the honey mead. Now, if you can't find honey mead or it's not particularly handy for you, you can certainly use Chardonnay and honey. Two of those combinations will work quite well with this particular recipe. And trust me when I say, when you're serving it, nobody will notice. I'm not going to sit there up and go, hey, wait a second, you used Chardonnay and honey, not honey mead. No one will be able to discern the difference. So it's certainly one very, very viable option for you. So what we're going to do is we're going to move our mixing bowl in a little closer. A little closer. A little closer. There we go. And we'll whip in the honey mead and the gelatin. And just like that, our sorbet is incorporated and finished. Now all we have to do is transfer it into a container, put it in the freezer, and let it set up. And this is one of my favorite sorbets, hands down. And I hope it becomes one of yours. Well, here we go again. It's time for some really exotic sorbets. And these sorbets, you will not need an ice cream machine to do this at home. All you need is basically a Cuisinart. And what we're going to do is we're going to start by making a mango lime sorbet. And inside the Cuisinart at this point in time, we have our fresh mango slices that we've already cleaned off of our mango. And we also have in here mango nectar. And we have a couple of fresh limes squeezed in here as well too. Now one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to show you how to get around the problems that a lot of people have with juicing. If you don't have a juicer at home, what do? How do you get the lime juice? How do you get the lemon juice out and get the most out of it? Well, I always use one of these. Take it and turn it inside out from how you normally use it. Put your lime on the inside and squeeze. And you get all your juice out. This is a really effective way of squeezing a lime or a lemon out and getting everything you need out of it. And we're going to do this with a couple of limes right now. And this will hit the spot. Now some chefs will insist on zesting the limes. I don't think that that's necessarily a good idea for doing it in this. And the reason being is the zest of the limes, it gives it kind of a gritty texture, and more often than not, those little pieces of lime zest get caught in between teeth, and sometimes they stick to the inside of your throat on the way down, and so I don't particularly care for it at that point in time for those reasons. There's other ways to make up for lime flavor. You can certainly use Rose's lime juice. You can certainly use lime oil, which is basically the zest without the zest. And also, too, there's something on the market called True Lemon and True Lime, and those are basically crystallized pieces of lime that are dissolvable. And that adds a nice little punch, too. I find during the course of my career in doing pastries in restaurants that if you take several different sources of a particular flavor in this particular case, limes. You use fresh lime juice, use roses, use, for example, the true lime that I was telling you about, and some lime oil. Between all of those together, it packs a potent punch of lime, and it doesn't give you that artificial flavor or the canned flavor or anything like that. Between all of them, depending on how your palate is balanced and what you want out of your flavor, you can mix and match those flavors together and come up with some really potent taste bud bombs that just overpower the palate and just give you one heck of a true lime flavor that actually is hard to replicate with just one source. So if you're just using fresh lime juice, you're just using roses, that's a little bit limiting. So I suggest using several sources for your lime flavor. In this particular case, we're going to be using some fresh limes, and we're going to be using a little bit of lime oil. And the lime oil we already have in a pot off to the side, and we'll get to that in just a second. In the meantime, what we're going to do is we're going to take these mangoes and this lime juice, and we're going to puree it nice and smooth. Here we go. Now you can see that we've got a really nice smooth consistency, and this is exactly what we want. Now whenever you turn on any type of a food processor and you've got it loaded, I always recommend pushing down slightly on the top of the food processor. It gives you a better seal, and that initial jolt when you're pureeing things doesn't come out the seam right here and drip down the sides. Even when you're pushing down, you may get a few drops here and there that'll come out the sides, but other than that, it's no big deal. So it's just a little preventative maintenance there as far as like not needing to clean up a mess later on. As you can see, we have the mango pureed very, very nice and smooth. And this is exactly what we're looking for in consistency, because that's going to translate directly to how smooth the puree is as far as like, you know, the final product when it's frozen and it comes into the point where it's a sorbet. And also too, what we have here holding the bowl in place is what's called a stabilizer, and this is a silicone ring, and it holds the bowl in place. Nice grip, doesn't go anywhere, frees up both your hands. Absolutely a smart idea to have one of these in your kitchen. And you can see here in this pot we've heated up our gelatin and some of the mango nectar, and we only want this barely hot enough so that the gelatin melts completely. We don't want to really cook the juice because we can give the juice an aftertaste that's not very pleasant when it comes to putting together the sorbets. So all you're doing is heating up the juice enough to melt the gelatin, and we're done. Nothing else needs to be done at this point. And we're going to take the juice and the gelatin and whip it right into the mango puree. And we're going to make sure that we whip it in quickly and incorporate it fast. This way we can make sure that we don't get any lumps of gelatin in there, because that won't do us any good. We stir it in thoroughly and make sure that it's all incorporated evenly. And you can see that this is hands-free because of the silicone stabilizer ring that we have here. It makes our job so much more easy. And just like that, we're done putting together this sorbet. And now all we do is just add this to a container where it's going to go into the freezer. You can see how it comes out nice and even and clean. Nothing left behind. We don't even have to scrape it out. Perfect. And now we're going to take this opened and put it directly into our freezer. And that way, once in a while, we can give it a stir so it freezes evenly and quickly. And then when the time comes, it'll be frozen solid and we'll be able to eat it. Now, if you go to the freezer, and each particular sorbet has a different consistency when it freezes. So if you go and check out your sorbet after it's actually frozen solid, check out the consistency on it. Maybe it's a little bit harder than you want it to be, maybe not. If that's the case, when time comes to serve, just take it out a few minutes earlier and let it sit on the counter. And it will soften up very nicely and very evenly, and you'll be able to scoop it right out with an ice cream scoop. You have no problem serving it at all. Any way you want, with any type of fruit you want, any type of dessert you want. It's totally up to you and how you want to do it. Okay, now it's time to make a hibiscus and peach sorbet, and we're going to have a tangerine scent to it, let's say. Very mild tangerine flavor in the background. Now, hibiscus is a flower that has a very mild orange flavor to it and will dye things red because it has a very strong pigmentation. Hibiscus is used very often in Jamaican cooking and in Mexican cooking, and it's basically the flower of the plant. And you can see here how it's all dried, and this is what it looks like when it comes in a package. When you're looking for packaging in the stores, this is what you're looking for, something along these lines. There's usually 2 or 3 varieties of companies that bring this into the Chicago area. A package like this, which is 2 ounces, will generally cost about $2.50. Also, too, this makes an excellent iced tea. All you have to do is take the hibiscus and soak it. Now, what you soak it in is your choice. In this instance, what I did was I used a little bit of Chardonnay wine. The acids of the wine help bleed the pigment out of the flour, and also basically gives you a stronger flavor through chemical cooking. Chemical cooking means that you're not using any heat. And chemical cooking means that you have to use an acid. An acid can be a sugar, it can be any type of a citrus fruit, lime, lemon, grapefruit. It can even be tomatoes if the acidity counts high enough. So this has been broken down through using the acidity of the white wine. And this is what we're using. And this is our hibiscus juice and our hibiscus. This basically is sat overnight. So it's got a nice strong flavor that we're going to use and incorporate into what we're doing. Okay, now we're going to puree the peaches. We have our sugar added in here already. Now, one of the things I'd mentioned in an earlier video was that salt is an enhancer. It basically enhances your ability to taste things when you're cooking. That's also true when you're doing baking and pastries. But we're not going to add any salt to this to enhance the flavor. Instead, what we're going to use is a lemon. A lemon is an excellent source of acidity, and this will basically do a nice job of enhancing all the rest of the flavors that we're using. And it won't overpower the soft, milder flavor of the peaches or the tangerine that we're going to be using, let alone the hibiscus. So we're going to take an orange and literally use our fruit squeezer right here and get our juice out of it, and we're all set and ready to rock and roll. Now you can see from the level of the fruit that's in here to the top here when it's turned on. So when you're filling up your Cuisinart to turn it on and puree, you're about halfway up. This way it doesn't come up out over the sides. Another little key tip here in terms of how to use a Cuisinart. Okay, we're going to start to put this together. You can see we got this nice smooth peach puree coming out. 1 lump, 2 lumps. We'll fish those out. And we're all set and ready to rock and roll. Pretty easy, huh? There's one right here. And where'd that second one go? Alright, now we're going to get to the finale. Very simple and to the point. We're going to maintain our methods. We're going to take our melted gelatin. We're going to put this all in together. Okay, we've added our gelatin and our juice into our peach puree. And now we're going to add our tangerine oil. Tangerine oil is very concentrated and very strong, so we're only going to add a couple of drops, literally. And that's it. Now, if you can't get your hands on any tangerine oil or any type of oils like that, you can certainly use extracts if you desire. And then the final part of the puzzle is our hibiscus. We're going to run that right through a strainer. This way we don't get any pieces in here, and we're all set and ready to rock and roll. And see how it dyes it? And it almost looks like it's blackberry, just because of the pigmentation of the hibiscus. Pretty cool stuff, huh? And that's peach. How about that? Okay, we transfer it into a freezer container. Pour it in slow, you don't want to spill anything. Once again, it comes out nice and clean. Now, if you do have any lumps of gelatin in here, most likely they'll stick to the side of the bowl and you'll see them on the way out. So you'll be able to pick them off real easy if that does happen. If you ever go to a vineyard and you walk away with a dessert wine, many times when dessert wines are opened up at the end of a meal, they're not finished, and people are wondering, what do you do with the rest of it? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to poach some red pears in a dessert wine that we got from Warner Vineyards. And here's the bottle. How's that for a nice close-up shot? And we're going to use a red currant white wine, dessert wine, and we're going to augment it with a little bit of sour cherry syrup from Cocovia. A little bit of the red syrup will actually help dye the pears and give them a rosy red color. And we've just put this on the fire. We're using red pears that have been peeled completely and pitted. And we're going to simmer them nice and slow over a low fire. And we're going to monitor them and see how long it takes for us to poach them. And then just before they're finished, we're going to pull them off the fire and let them cool. That way they won't overcook. And they'll finish cooking in the hot broth that's made by the wine and by the syrup. And then we're going to use those for our exotic sorbets. And here we have our pears cooling off. You can see it goes in real easy. Literally pushes right in. Absolutely no resistance. So this is exactly what you want when you're poaching your pears. You want them to be cooked, but you don't want them to be soft and falling apart. Notice how they're upside down? This tells you how done they are when they're upside down, because if they're overcooked, they'll collapse under their own weight. Okay, now we're going to slice up our pears. We're going to lay them into our bowl, and then we're going to top it with our mango sorbet, our mango lime sorbet. So we're going to check this out and see what you think. First thing we're going to do is cut our slices long and thin as much as possible. Now you'll see as we cut this, the exterior of the pear will be red and the interior will be white. So this will give us a nice color accent. A lot of times in French cooking, the chefs will use Burgundy wine, whereas we used a currant dessert wine, so we don't have as deep a color in this. Also too, they'll use harder pears, generally speaking, so they can cook them longer and get the color to entrench a lot deeper. So literally, the pigments from the Burgundy wine will literally reach the center of the pear by the time the pear is done. Very important that the pears be cut in half and pitted so that they cook evenly. Some chefs think that keeping the pears whole and cooking them, well, if they're serving it whole, that's fine, but if you're doing anything else with them, it's not fine. Because what happens is the exterior has a tendency to overcook, and the interior is still not quite done. So, for the most consistent final product, I highly recommend splitting the pears in half, pitting them, and then slicing them once they're done cooking. That way you'll have a nice consistent product. And here we go. And don't worry about them sliding around on you a little bit, that's natural. The curve of the bowl, along with the fact that it's a wet and just recently cooked fruit, makes them just a little bit slippery, but that's okay. We will get past that. And you can see that with the particular bowl that I picked out, we have enough room to handle the entire thing. So two pear halves I should say, used for this particular bowl, and we have plenty to work with. All right, now our mango sorbet. It was literally that simple, easy to scoop out. We left it at room temperature for a little bit, got it soft, and literally, this is all we have to do about is poke a hole in it. Oh, maybe poke a bigger hole in it. How does that sound? There we go. And simple and to the point, we straighten it out for our camera angle. There we go. And we have our mango and lime sorbet. And it's being served with a fresh mint leaf. Here we have our final finished product, our mango lime sorbet with a couple of nice lime twists, some mint for a nice summer garnish, and of course our poached pears that were cooked in red currant dessert wine and a little bit of sour cherry syrup. And there we have it, pretty simple and to the point, a very elegant, nice, light summer dessert. Something that can be served with dinner, with lunch, with brunch, you name it. And the cool part about it is, if you have anything of this that's left over that you prepared, you can take it and put it into the freezer, and then when it's time to make smoothies, bring it back out and punch it into one of your smoothies, and you're all set and ready to rock and roll. So it's a no waste situation. Enjoy. And here we are with the hibiscus and peach sorbet. As you can see, it's just a variation of the mango sorbet that we showed you earlier. And as you can see, we've added some raspberries to it.